I'm Matthew Phelps, co-author of the Turning to God's Word Bible study, The United Kingdom of Israel, Foreshadowing the Reign of Christ the King. Today we'll be talking about lesson 19 of our study, which covers the second book of Samuel, chapter 18, verse 19, through chapter 19, verse 40. So, as we've left off, the battle between David and Absalom has concluded, and Absalom is dead. Now we get to the part where David has to be notified of the fact that his son is dead. And here we have the son of Zadok the priest, Ahimaaz, who is eager to carry tidings, and Joab the commander saying, "No, you shouldn't be the one to do this. The king likes you. And why would you want to be the one to give him bad news under those circumstances?" And so Joab wants to send a Cushite instead to go do so. And does, in fact, take that course. But then Ahimaaz continues to want to also carry tidings and keeps asking and asking until eventually Joab relents. And we'll see how all of that plays out. But two messengers then have been sent with the same message, the Cushite first and Ahimaaz second. So we have two messengers who have set out with the same message, Ahimaaz and the Cushite. And here we see that Ahimaaz is fueled by the haste that comes from ambition, and though he left second, manages to arrive first. Especially noteworthy, with him having left second, there is no way that he has less knowledge about what happened than the Cushite who left first, just to establish that as a point of fact moving forward here. So, David sees the messengers coming, goes down to greet them, obviously eager for news, and again he initially encounters Ahimaaz with his message, who says, David's obvious two questions are going to be, how's the battle going, and what about Absalom? So, first, how's the battle going? It's great, we won. Good news. Second question, and what about Absalom? Oh, I don't know. There was so much commotion. I don't know what happened there, is the message that gets to David. So, Ahimaaz, more than willing to give the good news, but cognizant of the fact that it's not, the phrase shoot the messenger comes from somewhere. He's not eager to be the one to deliver to the king the news that his son is dead. So he gets to show up and get credit for bringing the good news and be associated with delivering good news, and then conveniently forget what happened to Absalom. So now the Cushite arrives also with his message, and David, pretty much same question, or same initial part of the message. The battle went well, and except this time also, the Cushite delivers the message, Absalom is dead. David does not shoot the messenger, but he does react by going up to his room and weeping for the death of his son, which is understandable and even predictable. Even though Absalom had set himself up as an enemy of David, he is still David's son, and David would still not at all be happy to see his passing. The king has heard that his son is dead and has retired to his room weeping, which, again, understandable human reaction to what has occurred. But then we go back to the point of view of the army, who, these are loyal followers of David who have been with him through his losing power as king and have continued to side with him and have helped him win what is in their minds a great victory over their enemies who vastly outnumber them. And, they would be a little excited over that because it signals a resolution of this, although it's not resolved yet, it signals a likely resolution of this issue of the kingship and a great victory for them and a return to power for David. So, really good news, let's celebrate. And then the king is just super bummed out about it, which Joab notices is substantively harming the morale of the people, who are, instead of celebrating, kind of quietly slinking back into the city and not really enjoying a thing that prior to David's reaction they would have enjoyed. Here Joab, once again, is seen to have David's back, although admittedly a little less so in the part where he just killed David's son, whom David would have preferred to have not be killed. And again, based on the wording of the message we've seen, we can imagine that David does not yet know that. Whether he ever ends up knowing that or not is another issue, but it's likely he just heard one message and took off to his room. He hasn't had time for a lot of other news at this point. But Joab takes it upon himself to go up and talk to David about how he's responding and say, "You really need to be concerned here, David. I know we've had some ups and downs here recently, but if you don't make sure the people feel good about what they did for you, then you're going to lose their support here before you're king again, and it's going to keep going downhill." And if you think about what could happen in that scenario, with David still out of favor and the support that he had leaving before getting everybody back on board with him being king, it could easily happen that Israel could decide to set up someone else as king who could be a catastrophe for the people and could create more strife and more war. And it is a very delicate time right now, and Joab, being a competent military commander, is fully aware of that. And so he gets David to get with the program and at least go out and make a show of thanks everybody, we won, good. Obviously he's not going to get David to stop being sad about the death of his son, but he does go out and do his duty as king toward the people who risked their lives for him. So, while David and his followers are celebrating a victory won, to varying degrees obviously, but they're strong and united again, the Israelites, who have just lost this particular encounter, the leadership at least, are thinking to themselves, whoops, we backed the wrong horse, and oh, remember how good we had it under David, like all the things we said we wanted a king to do, protect us from our enemies, make sure there was peace and prosperity, those things happened. And then we backed his son for some stupid reason, and now his son is dead and he's gone. We need David back now. And so the Israelites, at least, are thinking, it is time to get that king back. Not somebody else. We want David back. Let's get on that. So, the people of Israel, as distinct from Judah, already at this point in the minds of the author and the way we're talking about it, Israel being essentially everything non-Judah, is here distinct from Judah, and Israel ready to come back to David. Judah not taking any steps there. And David's a little sour about that, but if you think about it, they have a decent reason, namely being the war for power between David and Absalom was entirely within the house of Judah, and so it would be easier for Judah to be divided amongst itself. Some people sided with David, some people sided with Absalom. Israel more or less just sided with Absalom, and then when he was gone said, whoops, we were wrong. But there was more division and dissension here in Judah. So it could take them longer there wouldn't even be a single group of elders that would be very easy to get on board, who would all agree with one another, who could say, yeah, we should go follow David again. So harder thing to navigate, but David, being from Judah, is familiar with some of how that works, and he has a way to deal with it. So rather than going himself, or even sending Joab, who was clearly from Judah but on Team David, he sends people who can at least be seen as neutral and who happen to not at all be neutral, his priests. By his priests, I mean the two he had appointed into his cabinet. And they go and convey the message, what the heck, guys, all of the Israelites have acknowledged me already, and you, my own people, haven't yet gotten around to acknowledging that, yes, I am the king. But I get it. There are some issues here. Let's try to unite the factions a little bit, which is where he makes the move of appointing the guy who was Absalom's general, Amasa, as leader of his troops in place of Joab. It's also possible by now that he has figured out that Joab maybe stepped a little bit outside of the lines in terms of not following orders and was looking for a replacement anyway. That is certainly within the realm of the kind of thing that could be happening, but it is very crafty politically that he took a guy who is on the other faction within Judah and gave him what is basically the second most powerful position in the government, the guy who is in control of the army, to try to placate the differing factions here in Judah as he's working to get them on board. And it works. So, David is now returning to Jerusalem, and as we saw on his way out, a bunch of people coming out to talk to him as he left, a bunch of people, some of them the same people, will now come out to talk to him again as he is looking to re-enter. And here first we see Shimei, the Benjaminite, who was cursing David out over what he did, what Shimei perceived he did to the house of Saul, and is now seeing, oh wait, this guy is king again. Oops. He let me go before when he was running, but I really didn't make a very good impression there, and maybe I ought to do something about that. So he brings 1,000 men with him, Benjaminites, again, to stand out, not to challenge David or to put up any kind of fight or even to protect him necessarily, but just as a show of support and recognition of David as king, which is a big departure from where he was leaving when David was leaving, basically saying, David, blood on his hands, accusing him of essentially being an illegitimate king, at least implicitly. And now he's saying, yep, you're the man, you're the king, I'm sorry, I sinned, I support you, go David, go Team David. And once again, we see one of those great sons of Zeruiah, Abishai, say, you didn't let me cut his head off last time, but now that we're in power again, you're going to let me do that, right? David says, get away from me, people. You guys do not understand at all. We're not about murdering people for the sake of murdering people. It still holds that God was talking to me through what he was saying before, so why would I take that out on him? And plus, look, he's sorry, so no, please don't do that. He's fine. And there we go. So, after Shimei goes his way with his head very much intact, we see the next person coming out, Mephibosheth, who, if you recall, was not present when David was leaving town, and his servant Ziba happened to be there on his behalf with gifts for David and his men, and mentioned just in passing that his master wasn't there because he had sided with Absalom and was hoping to get his family's throne back and didn't want to support David. And now Mephibosheth shows up. He hasn't shaved or showered or groomed himself at all since David left, and has clearly been in a fairly perpetual state of mourning and has a wholly different story from that of the servant. Specifically, I sent my servant to get my donkey ready so I could go with you, and then he never came back. And I've been so distraught since you left. All I care about is your well-being. You were so good to me when you didn't have any reason to need to be. So David, hearing both sides of the story, says, well, okay, I already promised him all of your land. How about we split the difference and I give him half of your stuff and you keep half of your stuff? To which, again, Mephibosheth, if he was plotting sedition, is doing an excellent job covering it and says, I don't need any of that stuff. All I need is that you're okay. Which is also true from a material point of view. As long as he's welcome at the king's table and the king is alive, he will be fine. And he's not going to have to worry too much. But the attitude seems pretty heartfelt here, at least, in that it seems like he is just glad David's alive, which is more consistent with what you'd expect from a son of Jonathan, in all honesty. So the text never clarifies for sure, did the servant lie or is Mephibosheth lying here? But it looks an awfully lot like the servant was lying. So, but you can all decide that for yourselves. But at any rate, David takes Mephibosheth back into his camp. Finally, on his way back into town, David meets Barzillai, one of the people who gave him and his men sustenance and support when they needed it when they were on the outs. Wisely, he is coming to meet David on David's way back into town to say, hey, remember me? I helped. There were a couple other guys who helped as well who didn't have the sense to show up to try to get credit for it. But then he's there, he's trying to get credit for it, and what does David say? Well, you should move into the palace with me, and I'll take care of everything you need. Pretty great offer, and he's there with his hands out, and yet he, somewhat surprisingly at first, says, I don't want that. I'm too old to really enjoy that, and I'd rather go back to my place and die. But here's this guy, Chimham. You should take him in the place you were going to put me in. Context suggests, and scholarship agrees, that this guy is Barzillai's son, which would explain he's here to try to get promotion for the family, not for him personally. So, all the rewards you were going to give me, here, give to my son. He has a much longer life, he can enjoy them more, he's more likely to succeed and to gain more position in your court anyway, because he's not 80 yet, so it'll be good for all of us, and that is in fact what happens. So, David shows pretty solid amount of loyalty to the people who showed some to him, and seems to have not diverted from wanting to follow God as he's coming back to town now. He shows the same general attitude towards things that he showed leaving, which again is a good sign for the character of David. He doesn't let his mood and his current prosperity dictate whether or not he's trying to serve the Lord. This has been an overview of Lesson 19 of the Turning to God's Word Bible Study, The United Kingdom of Israel, Foreshadowing the Reign of Christ the King. For more information, consult our written study and visit us online at turningtogodsword.com.